Hi, I'm Patricia Greenberg, and we are here to talk about all things aging well. And all that we seem to talk about these days is getting older, and then fear sets in. Will we have enough? Who will take care of me? Will I stay healthy? All these questions we have, for ourselves, and many of us are caring for elderly parents while dealing with our own aging bodies and minds and set of issues that come with it. I'm thrilled to have with us today Dr. Macie Smith. She's a gerontologist and Synergy Home Care representative, a licensed gerontology social worker, and an award winning Alzheimer's and dementia educator with over 22 years of experience working with aging and vulnerable populations. Welcome, Dr. Macie.
Thank you for having me, Patricia. Ready to get into this conversation.
Absolutely. I'm so much to ask. I hope we can fit it all in. So, I personally love that I'm aging, and I do my best on a daily basis to embrace all that comes with it. And what I tell people on my shows, because I talk a lot about how do we feel about aging? What is our attitude towards aging ourselves? Because I think it really informs how we view other people. And one of the best things we can do for ourselves is to open up the conversation about our own attitude and how we can embrace the changes that come to us, prepare for them, and how we can also help others. So, as the founder of Diversified Training Consultants Group, let's start out by talking about the growing need for more education and understanding of cognitive decline that comes with age.
It's so interesting that not interesting that you said that we fear aging. In America, we do. We're an anti-aging country. Every other commercial is reverse the aging process, stop the aging process. Well, I don't want to do none of that because
Right.
that means I'm not living. When you're living, you're aging. And so what does that mean for you? And with my business, I have to train on cognitive decline because many people feel that once they reach a particular age or once their loved one reaches a particular age and they forget where they put their keys or where they put their glasses and they're on their face, oh
Right.
my gosh, I know it's got to be dementia. Well, that adds to that fear of aging. And so to be able to dispel those myths, we all forget where we lost something, but we retrace our steps, we go back and get it, keep it pushing. And so being able to educate about what cognitive decline actually is and what's the difference between cognitive impairment, age associated memory impairment, and full on dementia, people walk away with a sense of relief that this is normal. But even if someone does begin to experience the early stages of dementia, they can still live a fulfilling life for as long as feasibly possible. And that's where that education comes in. Because if you can't change a thing, why fear a thing? Right now, you have to not necessarily fight it, but you have to be intentional about how you fit into that process and how you view it. Mindset is everything when it comes to everything.
You know, Dr. Macie, we might get to this, but I want to ask you because this is so interesting to me. I'm 61 and I forget where I put things, but then I do exactly what you're saying. Well, I walked in the door, I put my keys down, my glasses were on top of my head. I had to go to the bathroom. I came out, I put the groceries away. Where'd the glasses go? And then I said, okay, I walked in the door, I put them down. So obviously, I'm multitasking, and you're not supposed to be multitasking. I'm learning more and more it's very bad for you to multitask as you age.
No, because we think you've heard people say, "Oh, I can do three, four, five, six different things at one time." You actually can't. You can't think about those things. You may be able to physically do them, but
Uh-huh.
you're not thinking about all those things at the same time. The mind doesn't work that way. And so you were distracted. The other thing, Patricia, that routine is everything as we age. It starts from younger age in terms of routine when we're teaching children how to brush their teeth and how to tie their shoes.
Right.
Routine that doesn't leave us. And so, if every time you come into the house with your glasses on your head and you go straight to the kitchen and put up the groceries, there's not a problem. It's the routine. But this
Right.
time you had to go to the bathroom and
Mm-hmm.
there was an interruption in your routine. So it's going to be an interruption in that flow of
Got it.
processing and flow of doing. So that's when you have to stop and think back, retrace your steps, and then you found them. And then when you laugh about it, I mean, you good.
Right, right, right. I guess the thing is when you forget and you don't have any recollection of doing it is when the problem is it.
That's where the concerns come
Right.
in. Also, not happening just one time, because when we talk about full on dementia, it's much more than memory loss. So it's memory loss plus the loss of another functioning ability.
Right.
And so if you are unable to retrace your steps, or it's taking longer for you to find that lost item on more than one occasion, and it's continually happening, it may happen today and then it may not happen again until next month, and then it happens again the following month, but now it's happening every 2 weeks, and so now it's getting closer and closer together, and it's happening more often. Something is happening. Doesn't necessarily mean it's dementia, but something is causing some type of cognitive impairment or some level of cloudiness.
You know, Macie, we talked offline a little bit about what we're going to discuss, but I'm going to throw a few things at you because everything you say opens another door, right?
Okay.
I know that Alzheimer's and cognitive decline are organic. It's a change in the brain. It's an actual organic decline of functioning as opposed to just being busy or too tired and you forget. So, can you just give me, and we're going to get into so much of how to deal with it. Can you just give me sort of is there a top five or a top three things to look for to know that you need to go have an exam for cognitive decline?
So if you in this, everybody is different. So
Mhm.
when you've met one person living with dementia, you've met that one person.
Right.
So what I'm getting ready to say needs to be different from what the person has been experiencing before. If they're forgetting recent information, or
Mhm.
they're forgetting information that they should know, that they've always known, such as my mother-in-law, she remembers everybody's birthday, including the pharmacist and the bag boy. She remembers everybody's birthday.
Okay.
So if your loved one begins to forget dates and places and events, um, and they've always remembered, that could be an indication.
Okay.
If they're forgetting recent information, such as they're supposed to be picked up today at 7 p.m. to go to a dinner, and you talked about it this morning, and when you get there to pick mom up, she doesn't remember, and it's happening more often,
Hmm.
that is an indicator.
Okay.
If you start to see more confusion and irritability, personality changes, and it's different for that person, and you're not seeing any triggers, that could also be an indication. And so it's when there's an interrupt, in addition to memory loss or confusion or
Right.
forgetfulness, there is an interruption in this person's cognitive pattern and processing information and following through on things that they've always been able to do, such as make macaroni and cheese without a recipe.
So personality carries with you throughout your lifetime, and personality stays with you as you get older. And we all know the good and the bad traits of your personality are more pronounced as you get older. So changes in that is a big red flag.
Yeah. So again, I'm gonna throw you off with something, Patricia.
Okay.
Some adult children don't really know how they mom and they daddy used to be back in the day, right? So they probably don't know that this is a behavioral trait of this person, right? And they may see it as different, but it may not be.
That's
But either
interesting.
way,
Okay.
but either way, to err on the side of caution, you would want to do that. But once you begin to peel back the layers, as you stated, as we get older, there's certain things that automatically that's going to change. Our perception is going to change.
Yes.
Um,
Hmm.
Things we used to care about, we don't care nothing about it no more. And so the way we process information, the words we choose to use, we may not want to use those words anymore. We may
Hmm.
not want to placate this person anymore. And so that happens organically with age. Again, but looking at this person, if it's interrupting their daily routine or their daily being, something could be wrong. And so personality truly is an indicator, but it could be something that's treatable.
Okay.
You know, medication, medication interactions, medication side effects. If their body doesn't agree with this new medication that they just started taking, you're going to see some of those behaviors. If medications that they're taking start fighting against each other, some chronic illnesses that we may not even know we have, diabetes. I can't tell you how many families I've worked with their adult child would call and say, "Mom, has dementia. the behaviors are very indicative of dementia. But what I do is rule out treatable causes
Got it.
first.
Hmm.
And I always ask about diabetes, and they say, well, mom doesn't have diabetes. Well, she probably don't know she has it. And so I've had many that were pre-diabetic or their blood sugars were just off, too
Right.
high or too low. And so you have to get treatment for those things: high blood pressure, thyroid conditions, conditions related to liver. That all has an effect on your neurological functioning.
I want to ask you, in your experience, how how do you see the actual patient responding to the cognitive decline? Is it something they don't, is some of the agitation and the irritability related to the fact that the person's frustrated that they can't find things?
Oh,
So
yeah.
do people acknowledge and say, "Hey, I don't remember my child's phone number. I don't, or a handyman calls and you can't give them the address." Does the person know that that's happening to them?
Yeah. So, excellent question. What we know about the progressive dementias that we see, which is Alzheimer's, vascular, Lewy bodies, frontal temporal, many, many more. What we know is that the person begins signs 10 to 15, sometimes even 20 years before the symptoms become significant to someone else. And so they do know that they're experiencing
Uh-huh.
this. And I'll tell you, they hide what they don't remember, they hide what they're experiencing. Typically, the folks around them don't see the signs and symptoms until it's well progressed or
Got
well
it.
pronounced, because depression looks just like dementia. And so if you simply consider dementia because you're focusing on a person's age and not what's happening in their life, various influences and factors, then they're going to be mistreated, like with medication wise, and also maybe socially as well.
Hmm.
They won't be getting the treatment for depression, they're getting treatment for dementia. And so it's not going to help the situation because they're misdiagnosed and mistreated.
We have the conundrum now, Dr. Macie Smith, about how many families are both caring for the younger children, the elderly parents. We're all hearing the term sandwich generation.
Mhm.
They're right in the middle. And I've been there. I was there. It's the worst place to be.
Mhm.
And we unfortunately have buried three parents.
Wow.
And my
Wow.
daughter was little, and my mother-in-law was 103 when she died.
Oh
And I
my
want to throw
goodness.
in, because I think there was a little bit in your information about this, we believe in multi-generations being in the house. So
Oh,
we had
yeah.
at one given time, I love sharing this, I had my mother-in-law 103. My husband at the time was just turning 70. I am 61, so I was probably in my late 50s at the time. We had a son in his 30s here, my husband's son, and we had a teenage daughter,
Wow.
all in one household, and three dogs and lots of activity.
Yeah.
But I cannot tell you how priceless it was that my daughter had a grandmother living in the house. Nobody does that
Yeah.
these days. I grew up with
Yeah.
grandparents, my husband didn't, but we had our house and we could go over to my grandmother's house and my mother could
Hmm.
leave us with my grandmother or my grandmother could come and visit. And we reveled in that multi-generational attachment. Now, the sandwich person, the lunch meat, they're going to the grandma's house and they're taking the kid to school and they're managing their own house.
Hmm.
And so they're not just managing a family like we, thank God, we're all in one home. They're
Hmm.
managing several households.
Households. That's right. And it's very stressful. It's stressful to manage your own. I only have one daughter and one husband, and it gets a little
Oh,
frustrating,
it's a lot of work. To trust me, I
right?
know.
And the caregiving is difficult.
Hmm.
However, it's rewarding based on, data and research I've done. My caregivers don't want it any other way. They say, yes, it's stressful. Yes, it causes depression. Yes, it interrupts my day and my routine and my well-being. However, I don't want nobody else taking care of mama.
Right.
I want to be sure that she's, taken care of. And that's okay. But our caregivers have to realize that it's okay to not be okay. And it's okay to ask for help. and receive help, so that way you can be good mentally, cognitively, emotionally, so you can be there for that person. So you mentioned that multi-generational stay, right? So that right there is nothing new to the African American community, right? However, there has been a shift, and you alluded to this, I think. Our families are a lot smaller in 2022 than they were in 1970s and 1960s and 1950s. You know, women had multiple children. Now, I mean, one for me, I feel like I am on top of the world, you know? But you had those natural supports in the 40s, 50s, and 60s and prior. But now, with families being a lot smaller, or, you know, I've even had clients who had no family at all, no children, no siblings. You talk about tough. That was tough. And so we had to create a natural family support system through community.
Right.
And so that's something else that we'll have to consider as we move forward with our baby boomers being the largest population. And that does come with challenges. Age is the number one risk factor to developing Alzheimer's disease. However, there are more people without it than more people with it.
Now, what happens when you see you go into a situation and both parents are having trouble? You can't just have often, the traditional, we always have this sense that the husband declines first and the wife takes care of the husband passes away, and then the children take care of their mother. That's not always the sequence of events.
No, it's not. And what I tend to see happen is whatever support, whichever spouse needs the most care, right? That person or that service or that support that's coming in for that person is going to be there for both of them. So it's like you're securing support for both parents because they need it. And then it just depends on the caregiver or the family member's resources. Many people think that Medicare covers long-term care for someone to come in and check on them and provide supervision and to cook and clean, but it doesn't. You either have to have long-term care insurance, and sometimes that's questionable as well. To your point, Patricia, I had a case where the husband had long-term care insurance. He developed Alzheimer's disease. The wife went to, put in the claim to receive funding to help with long-term care, and someone coming into the house, you'll never believe what was said. Her claim was denied because this particular policy did not allow for a wife to take care of the husband, because that's what the wife was going to do anyway. To your point, how historically and anecdotal data supported that the husband would decline and the wife would take care of him. That's like a routine or a natural occurrence to that particular insurance company. So it's very important that folks, if they have long-term care insurance, to read that policy, or get an elder care attorney to read that policy to be sure that it's what you think it is. And so if you don't have long-term care insurance and you don't have liquidity and annuities, how you going to pay for it?
So that is my question. Now, the spouse, in a lot of these benefits, you need to have an outside home health care worker. The spouse would not be paid to take care of the spouse. They need to have a caretaker come in addition to the spouse.
Yep. So that's when they will reach out to home care companies. A home care company, some home care companies will accept Medicaid. So Medicaid is based on each state. That is based on financial criteria and also level of care. And so a third party would then come in to provide that level of care for whatever the folks need. If it's ADLs, so hands-on care, or instrumentals, such as doing housekeeping, transportation, or what have you. That's what home care companies are for. They do personal care rate services. They also do companion services. Some people don't need hands-on. They just need company. Right. They just need someone to talk to. So that's your one-stop shop. Actually, that's your beginning step before there's major decline. And it's important that when adult children have older parents or older loved ones, check on them and check on them often, so that way you may see a slight decline, or you may see something that's alarming, maybe in the house, maybe the dishes didn't wash or the floor didn't clean, and that's not like them. You can bring in a home care company earlier than later, and they would have developed a relationship
Right.
and could actually be a great support for the families.
Yeah, you'd like to see a long-term relationship.
Absolutely.
Can you give us a kind of a breakdown of your approach, sort of the the start to the middle to the finish of your business, that and how you assist people in getting quality home health care? I know that it's through Synergy Home Care, and I just
Mhm.
tell us a little bit about is do you get the phone call? Does a social worker call you? Does a family member call you? How does that process work?
All of the above.
Okay.
So anybody can call Dr. Macie. I
Yep.
mean, it could be somebody at the red light call me and say, "Hey, I think something is going on." Like, what
Yep.
street are you on? And so the referrals can come in from anywhere to me. They can go directly into Synergy Home Care. And what happens is both of us, we go in and we do an assessment to make a determination as to what the particular client needs. Now, if you ask the family member, they may say, "Oh, well, I do everything for mom." Well, I go in and assess what actually mom needs, so that way I can let you know you're doing too much. You're more so hurting her and yourself, and hitting
Yes, yes.
her and yourself. She don't need all that. She don't need you looking in her face all day long. She want to look at like Days of Our Lives or something.
Right.
And so being able to go in and do an environmental surveillance or a home assessment, and also to actually see that individual in their natural environment, that's what's going to give you a lot of what you need. I had a client once, and maybe she had 5 children and 3 of them were there. And she whispered to me, she said, "Please get them out of here." She
Yeah.
said, "I wish they would just go home." They were causing more angst and anxiety than necessary. And so we come in and we do an assessment. We talk to the family. We talk to the client by themselves, because sometimes they're not, upfront and honest with you, because they want to say what the daughter or the son wants them to say. So, always have that conversation with the client or the senior alone, and then bridge together that information, develop a plan of care, write it up and say, "This is what, based on my assessment, this is what you need." And Synergy Home Care is a provider that can provide that for you. Then Synergy comes in and makes an assessment, determine how many hours of care they need, what type of care they need. And they begin to make that bond and build that relationship.
So I have two questions for you, kind of
Mhm.
twofold. One is that so you make an assessment, and then do you have people who are trained in multi talented? So somebody's going to come in, maybe do light housekeeping, care, all the way up to if the person does need their personal hygiene assistance with their personal hygiene, or they just need someone to sit and play cards with them and eat lunch. Do the caregivers that you send have a training program that they go through, or
Oh, absolutely.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
So Synergy Home Care has a comprehensive training program for all caregivers. In fact, that one caregiver can do all of that.
Okay.
They're providing. So when we think about individualized care, which is what we provide, whatever that person needs at that moment or at that frame of time, that's what the caregiver provides. And so they're trained in comprehensive care program, and it's not just new training; it's ongoing training, because you could forget stuff that you learned
Sure.
when you first came in, and when you have new training, you hadn't even had an opportunity to engage with clients. And so we provide ongoing training on the job, also classroom style lectures and training. And so it's a requirement, because we have to keep up with the nuances in the industry. And then based on the foundational knowledge, now we apply it to individuals that we're providing care for, because it could look a little bit differently, but you have the foundational knowledge. So our caregivers are fully trained in a comprehensive model. In addition to that, it's not just about the client, but we also bring in the family, because the caregiver is not there 24 hours a day.
That's the
And so,
second half of what I was going to
oh,
ask you.
you
How do
want
you, yeah, how do you get, that was this part two. How do we get the family members involved with the caregivers so everybody's on the same page?
So typically we try to have some overlap at some point in time, either when a caregiver gets there or when a caregiver leaves, and they document the person's day. There may be a change in personality, a change in behavior, a change in physicality, a
Right.
change in bowels or bladder. And so we have documentation that we share with the caregiver. It's almost like when you're in a long-term care community, assisted living or nursing home, you have to staff it before you
Yes,
change shifts.
yes.
So
Yes.
that's what we do. That's what makes it comprehensive, because the caregiver needs to better understand the day their loved one had. So if there's any changes, they kind of know what the caregiver did. And so that continuity of care is very important to ensure that the person is able to live in their natural environment for a longer period of time, which is what they want. Our seniors want to live in their natural environment or in their home for as long as they can. And the comprehensive education training program that Synergy provides helps that.
Macie, there's so much more I want to ask you. What about, we'll go as long as we can. What about the belligerent patient or the distrustful child or the brother-in-law that comes in and says, I'm paying for this and this isn't how I want it done? What do we do about that?
So you gave me 3 different scenarios.
Yeah, I'm
And every
throwing it
one of
all at you. Yeah, just,
Yeah, and every one of them is different in terms of the patient. If there are some behavioral challenges, then we have to look at the reason behind those challenges. Simply because they're 80 years old doesn't mean that they're just going to be challenging.
right.
Simply because they have dementia doesn't mean they're just going to be challenging. Something causes that. Maybe they're afraid of something. Again, maybe it's some medication or some illness. Maybe it's their environment. So we got to figure out what's causing them, who's different from everybody else. Because
Right.
sometimes we say everybody with dementia acts like this, and everybody, no, they don't, right? So figure out what's causing those behaviors. As far as the adult children who wants to take control of the situation, again, that's individualized. You're talking about the brother or the son who's paying for everything and making decisions. Well, that's where advanced care planning comes in, right? So advanced care planning, we talk about healthcare power of attorney and durable power of attorney. The time to start thinking about that is before it's time to start thinking about it.
Absolutely,
Right.
absolutely.
And so being able to identify a decision maker in the event of, many people think, Patricia, if they have healthcare power of attorney or durable power of attorney, they make the decisions. Not when mama got breath in her body.
That's
And
right.
she can still say what she wants. That document means nothing. And so having a third party come in, if it gets to the point where the family cannot manage and make decisions and be cordial for the sake of the senior, been there, seen it all, that's when somebody in the family needs to contact a geriatric care manager.
Right.
The geriatric care manager comes in and does family counseling, or I do family consultation, whereas I recommend the division of responsibilities. A lot of times, you have family members who one person says, I do it all, such and such doesn't help me, but maybe they don't know what all you do. And so having a third party come in and identify the needs for that senior and what best should happen makes all the difference in the world. Because if you got the younger child beefing with the older child, they're not hearing anything.
Absolutely.
And you got mama or grandmama in the middle, because that happened with my grandmama too, who developed dementia. She had a lot of depression, crying in the middle of my daddy and my aunt going back and forth. And I had to step up, Patricia. I was like, I know I'm the social worker. I know I'm the geriatric care manager, but that's still my daddy. That's still
I
my
know.
aunt. That's still my
I know.
mama. Right? You the kid. And so I had to figure out a way. They would always call me and ask me for some. Whenever they called and asked me a question, that was my opportunity to get it in there. So it may help to bring in a third party, but advanced care planning, absolutely, earlier than later.
So, we're hearing more and more about cases of elder abuse, which is tragic and so scary. How do we get a handle on this? Again, I guess it comes down to the education.
Well, yeah. That's a tough one. It's a tough one to hear about. It's a tough one to see. And it is a difficult one to rationalize. And I'm going to tell you why. Elder abuse is a little different from child abuse. And I'll tell you why I say that. Children, they need protecting all the time. They need someone to make decisions for them because they haven't reached that point where they can be self-sufficient. They've never reached that point to where they can be self-sufficient. So they always needed that. With an adult, they've been in a situation where they were self-sufficient. They were independent. They made their decisions. And so because they're dealing with some level of infirmity or because of aging or disability, they need some assistance in making decisions. And so one of the biggest types of abuse that we see is financial
Yes,
abuse
absolutely.
or financial exploitation.
Mm-hmm.
physical abuse is easier to determine, but still sometimes difficult to address. If that senior says, my grandbaby is the only person who can take care of me, whatever he wants, he can have. But clearly he's taking advantage of her because he just went out and bought a Ferrari, or he has $1 million house while his grandmama is living in a mobile home.
Right.
Right. And so it's difficult. So I'm a court appointed guardian. And so what happens in those situations, someone of concern, maybe a church member, a community member, or a neighbor, that's typically who calls, will call the Department of Social Services or Child and Family Services and make the complaint. The DSS worker will go out and do an assessment. If that DSS worker feels that there's abuse or exploitation, then they'll make the report to the court. Here in South Carolina, it's the probate court. In other states, it may be family court. Okay. They'll call in a guardian or guardian ad litem like me, and then I go out and do the assessment to make a determination as to what we need to do in the best interest of that senior. So you talk about how to get a hold of it. When it happens, we need to blast it. When it happens, we need to blast it. People need to be locked up and serve time for elder abuse. And that needs to be shown so that way we can try to deter people from doing it. But again, but of course, always education, information. The way in which information is disseminated is very important. Everything don't need to be on the internet all the time. It could be on the internet and in somebody's mailbox or in the newspaper. So making this issue and concern, because it is a huge concern. It is a public health epidemic. Making it visible in all elements and all avenues so that people know that this is a real thing.
You're the author of a Dementia Caregiver's Guide to Care, and this is a much needed guide to understanding how to work with people with cognitive issues. Can you again share some of the basics of this? As you know, we know what to look for, but how do we deal with it? Because one of the things we all know is we get a little angry. Come on, Daddy, I told you 3 times already. Dinner's ready. Or you tell your mother, I went to the store and I bought the oranges. They're in the refrigerator. I don't know how many times I have to tell you. And you get short with them and you get angry. And they can't help it. They genuinely don't remember. So again, what are some ABCs about approaching that? If someone, you're getting frustrated because you're repeating yourself, but then you realize, wait a minute, maybe there is something going on here that they're not understanding what I'm saying. So what's the approach that the caregiver or the family member should be taking? Because I'd imagine it's very hurtful for the patient when you're yelling at them.
Yeah, because they got feelings. They have a heart. Blood is running through their veins. So they feel the same way we all feel. And so my book is frequently asked questions. So it's not a big read at all. It's common questions that family caregivers have asked me over the years. And my very candid, straightforward response, because ain't nobody got time for the fluff. I need to know how to fix this. Typically, it may be surprising what I'm getting ready to say, but when scenarios like that happen and how do you plan for their care, really the caregiver needs to check themselves at the door.
Yeah.
Because if that person with Alzheimer's disease or a progressive type of dementia, they're pathologically and physically losing their brain cells. Their brain cells are deteriorating. So when I say they're doing the best they can with what they have, they are doing the best they can with what they have. So if there is a person who does not have dementia arguing with the person who does, I ain't gonna look at the person who has dementia because they got a reason. What's your reason?
Sure.
And so checking yourself at the door, how are you communicating with them? Are you using short phrases? Is your tone of voice low? Are you repeating the instructions the very same way with the same inflection? Are you physically showing the person what you're expecting them to do or what you're asking them to do? If it's time to brush their teeth, do this, because as the disease progresses, they become more they're not abstract thinkers, they're more concrete thinkers. So they're focusing more so on what they see than what they hear. So use verbal commands and verbal cues as much as possible. Your facial expression, your body language has to be positive. If it's not positive and it's negative, they're going to respond to what they see. So they're going to respond negatively because they're going to mimic what you see. And I know you say, Macie, well, I can't be positive all the time. No, you can't. You're human. That's when you take a break. You
Right.
take a step away, make sure they're safe, of course. You take a step away, gather yourself. You may need to call somebody because you may need what?
Sure.
Respite.
Sure.
Need to take a break because if you're getting to the point where you thinking, I've had one, she will call and say, Macie, I don't want to hurt mom, but she's really getting me upset. And I'm happy that she called. So I knew we had a plan. When that
Right.
happened, we had a plan and we, implemented that plan. So caregivers have to have a safeguard. They have to have someone or an entity that they can call, which one response or one option definitely would be Synergy Home Care. I
Right.
mean, it's right there. We got over 400
Yeah.
locations. I
Yeah.
mean, they're easily accessible, but don't be afraid to reach out for help because those responses that come from the person who may have dementia is in direct response to their environment, the stimuli in their environment, which includes the caregiver.
I want to also address the, if you can, sundowners syndrome and how some people become violent with Alzheimer's.
So sundowning, and everyone does not experience this, but sundowning tends to occur when the sun is going down. So it may be between 3 p.m. and 6 p.m. It could be between 2 and 7, just depends. And when the time changes, the whole time shifts
It's a big,
because
yeah.
they actually see the sun going down and that triggers previous life's patterns. And so when the sun is going down, if I'm typically picking up my children because they revert to previous life's patterns, even though they're 90 now, they're reverting back to when they were 29, picking up kids, going to the grocery store, cooking dinner, doing things. But now physically, they're not doing anything. They're sitting idle. So that's when they try to fulfill that desire for meaningful activity.
Oh,
And what
interesting.
happens is
Okay. I didn't
the
realize that.
caregiver doesn't want them to do that because this is dangerous, or you don't have any kids to pick up, or you don't have a job. So the caregiver is restricting them from doing something meaningful. And so when somebody is stopping you from doing something that you know you're supposed to be doing, what type of reaction would you have?
Yeah, you get
They have the
very
same reaction,
agitated. Sure. Mm-hmm.
the exact same reaction. But what we say is for people who don't have dementia, we say, oh, they're just irritable because traffic is heavy or they can't get off work in time. But if someone who has dementia, oh, they have behavior problems. No, they don't. You're restricting them from doing something that they should be doing.
And how do you remedy that?
Okay, so there are a lot of little tips and tricks you can do. One of the things you could do is ensure that they're engaged during that time of day, making sure that they're not sitting idle, that they're doing things that they enjoy doing. They could be in the kitchen with you. They could be outside doing yard work, depending on that person and what they enjoy doing in a previous life, their previous life's patterns. You can close the drapery so that way they don't actually see that the sun is going down. They could take a nap around that time of day or listen to music.
Okay.
The biggest thing for them not to see the sun going down and or be engaged around that time of day. And a lot of times they just want company. They just want someone to sit with them, see them, hear them, and be with them.
Okay. That's a beautiful explanation. I've never had it explained that clearly before. Macie, lastly, tell me about people have all different levels of financial situations and arrangements and insurances. How do, that's a whole nother conversation, which I hope to have you back and talk about. Again, in short, I think it's just about reaching out, right? Not worrying about what it costs, getting the information first. A lot of people
Right.
are afraid to make the phone call because they hear about the cost.
So you got to make the phone call because there are programs, there are government programs, there are community programs, there are in every state, there is an area agency on aging or council on aging or some form of fashion.
Right.
The Department on Aging has these arms of county agencies that have grant opportunities. They have resources that people can tap into for free. So don't ever be afraid to reach out because we talk about the cost because I don't like for it to be a sticker shock, right?
Right.
There are things you can do early on. If you have an older adult loved one that you may be in line to take care of, go ahead and contact the Department on Aging to find out what resources exist so that way you can plan and prepare for care.
Right. Excellent suggestion, and we're going to follow up with that. Dr. Macie, great conversation. And
Yes.
thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Macie Smith, gerontologist and Synergy home care representative, a licensed gerontology social worker, and an award-winning Alzheimer's and dementia educator with over 22 years experience of working with aging and vulnerable populations. And in closing, what do you like about getting older?
Oh my God. First of all, I will say that when I was 12, I wanted to be 22. So I always wanted to be older.
Yeah.
So I feel like now, Patricia, I've caught up.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I'm who I want to be. Like
Yeah.
I'm living my best life in my 40s.
Good for
And
you.
you know, people to me, younger people look up to me for advice, for life learning lessons. And so I like that. I love that because it makes me feel valuable and
Right.
I feel it here. And so that's what I feel like I just caught up with myself.
Right. So you're living a very rewarding life, and you have
Yes,
many, many years, God willing, ahead to keep doing that and keep growing.
yes,
So thank you
yes.
again and we will have you back because there's
Okay,
just
I was gonna say thank
so
you.
much more to talk about. This was just part one, right? So,
Yes.
and I want to thank all of our listeners to listening to Patricia Greenberg. And please take this opportunity to subscribe to my YouTube channel and to listen to the podcast on it's absolutely everywhere, Spotify, Anchor, wherever you can find it. Just look it up. And for more information about me and about Dr. Macie Smith, you can go to www.patriciagreenberg.com. Thank you again, Dr. Macie Smith, and look
You.
forward to seeing you again.